Jake Martinez stared out the small window of the transport ship as the massive Centauri defense station grew larger in front of them. The space station was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It looked like a giant metal city floating in space, with thousands of lights blinking across its surface. Ships of all sizes moved around it like busy insects. His hands were sweating inside his new uniform gloves. Jake wiped them on his pants and tried to calm down. Only 12 humans had ever been chosen for this program, out of billions of people. On Earth, he was one of just 12 picked to train directly under alien commanders. The weight of that honor felt heavy on his shoulders. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers toward the airlock. Most of them were aliens he had never seen before. Some had scales. Others had fur, and a few looked like they were made of living rock. They all seemed to know where they were going. Jake felt lost already. "Cadet Martinez!" a voice called out as he stepped into the station's main corridor. Jake turned to see a tall woman in a crisp blue uniform walking toward him. She had short brown hair and kind eyes. "I'm Lieutenant Kira Bell. I'm here to show you around." Jake felt relief wash over him. Finally, another human. "Thank you, Lieutenant. This place is huge," Kira smiled. "You'll get used to it. I've been here for 6 months now. Come on, let me take you to meet your commander." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The ceiling was high above them, built to fit aliens much taller than humans. Jake had to walk fast to keep up with Kira's long steps. Other beings moved past them, paying little attention to the two humans. "What's my commander like?" Jake asked as they turned down another hallway. Kira's smile faded a little. "Commander Zektar Voss is challenging. He's Catherian. They're very logical, very structured. They don't like surprises or changes to their plans. And to be honest, he wasn't happy when he found out he was getting a human cadet." Jake's stomach dropped. "He doesn't want me here?" "It's not personal," Kira said quickly. "Catherians just think differently than we do. They believe emotions make soldiers weak. They've heard that humans are too emotional and unpredictable for serious military work." They stopped in front of a large door marked with symbols Jake couldn't read. Kira pressed a button on the wall. "Commander Voss, Cadet Martinez is here for his assignment." The door slid open with a soft hiss. Jake followed Kira into a large room filled with screens showing star maps and tactical displays. In the center of the room stood the tallest being Jake had ever seen. Commander Zektar Voss was nearly 8 feet tall with skin that looked like blue crystal. Light seemed to shine from inside him, making patterns across his body. He had 4 arms, each ending in hands with long, thin fingers. When he turned to look at Jake, his eyes were like looking into deep water. "So," Commander Voss said in a voice that sounded like wind through metal, "this is the human." He walked around Jake slowly, studying him from all angles. Small, weak-looking, only 2 arms. He stopped in front of Jake and stared down at him. "Tell me, human, why should I waste my time training you?" Jake felt his face get hot. But he forced himself to stand straight and look up at the commander. "Because I'm here to learn, sir. And because Earth chose me to represent humanity in this program." Commander Voss made a sound that might have been laughter, but it wasn't friendly. "Earth chose you. How interesting. And what makes you think you can keep up with warriors who have trained for decades?" "I don't know if I can, sir," Jake said honestly. "But I'm willing to try." The commander studied him for a long moment. Honesty. That's something, at least. He turned to one of his screens. You will report here at 0600 hours tomorrow. You will train with my squad. You will follow orders exactly as given. You will not ask questions during exercises. And if you cannot keep up, you will be sent back to your little planet in shame. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. Lieutenant Bell will show you to your quarters. Dismissed. Jake and Kira left the command center in silence. They walked through more corridors until Kira stopped at a small door. She pressed her hand to a panel and the door opened. "This is your room," she said. "It's small, but it has everything you need. The mess hall is 2 levels down. Training starts early, so get some rest." Jake looked around the tiny room. It had a narrow bed, a small desk, and a closet barely big enough for his uniforms. "Kira, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Am I making a mistake being here?" Kira was quiet for a moment. "Jake, I won't lie to you. It's going to be hard. Really hard. The other species here are stronger and faster than us. They have abilities we don't have, and most of them think humans don't belong in a real military force." Jake sat on the edge of his bed. "That's not making me feel better." "But," Kira continued, "there's a reason Earth fought so hard to get humans into this program. We think differently than they do. We see things they miss. We adapt to new situations in ways that surprise them. You just have to prove that those differences make us valuable, not weak." After Kira left, Jake unpacked his few belongings and tried to sleep, but his mind kept racing. Tomorrow he would start training with aliens who had been warriors longer than humans had been in space. His commander already thought he was worthless. And if he failed, he wouldn't just be letting himself down. He would be letting all of humanity down. Jake stared at the ceiling of his small room and wondered what he had gotten himself into. Outside his window, the stars looked cold and far away. Earth was somewhere out there, but it might as well have been in another universe. Here on Centauri Defense Station, he was completely alone. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, Jake made himself a promise. He would prove that humans belonged here. No matter what it took, he would show Commander Voss and everyone else that being different didn't mean being weak. Tomorrow, his real test would begin. Jake's alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning. He had barely slept, but he forced himself out of bed and into his training uniform. The corridors were dimly lit and mostly empty as he made his way to the training center. When he arrived, he found 5 other beings already waiting. They were all much bigger than him. 2 were Catherians like Commander Voss, with their crystal-like skin glowing softly in the low light. 3 others looked different. They had gray skin covered in small scales and yellow eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Jake guessed they were Zentari soldiers. None of them spoke to him. They didn't even look at him. Jake stood at the edge of the group and waited. Commander Voss appeared exactly at 6. "Today we will run combat drills in the asteroid field simulator," he announced. "The objective is simple. Navigate through the field, locate the target, and destroy it without being destroyed yourself. Squad leader Kexavor will take point." One of the Catherians stepped forward. He looked at Jake with obvious dislike. "What about the human? Should we leave him behind where he'll be safe?" "The human will participate," Commander Voss said coldly. "We will see how long he lasts." They entered a large chamber filled with holographic projectors. Suddenly, Jake found himself floating in space, surrounded by spinning rocks the size of buildings. The asteroids moved in complex patterns, crashing into each other and creating dangerous debris fields. The squad moved forward in perfect formation. The Catherians used their forearms to control their movement systems with incredible precision. The Centauri moved like dancers, flowing around obstacles with grace Jake could never match. Jake struggled to keep up. His human reflexes felt slow and clumsy compared to the others. When a large asteroid came spinning toward him, he barely managed to dodge it. The others made it look easy. "Stay in formation, human," Kexvor barked over the comm system. "You're falling behind!" Jake pushed his thrusters harder, trying to catch up, but the faster he went, the more mistakes he made. He crashed into a small rock, sending him spinning out of control. By the time he recovered, the rest of the squad was far ahead. Through his helmet display, Jake watched as they reached the target, a mock enemy ship hiding behind a cluster of asteroids. They followed standard Catherian tactics, approaching from multiple angles with coordinated fire patterns. It should have worked perfectly, but something went wrong. The enemy ship had defensive systems they hadn't expected. Laser fire erupted from hidden turrets, catching the squad by surprise. One by one, their suits registered hits. In a real battle, they would all be dead. When the simulation ended, Commander Voss's anger filled the debriefing room like cold radiation. "Unacceptable," he said, his crystal skin darkening. "Squad formations were sloppy. Response time to enemy fire was too slow. And the human—" He turned his glowing eyes on Jake. "The human was completely useless. He couldn't even maintain basic flight patterns." Jake felt his face burn with shame, but he forced himself to speak. "Sir, I noticed something about the enemy ship's defensive pattern." The room went silent. All eyes turned to Jake. Commander Voss's voice was dangerous. "You noticed something while you were spinning helplessly through space?" "Yes, sir. The turrets fired in a specific sequence. They always targeted the largest group first, then worked outward. If we had approached in smaller groups instead of one formation, we could have confused their targeting system." Kexvor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The human thinks he understands tactics better than warriors who have fought for decades. Standard Catherian doctrine worked perfectly for centuries before humans even left their planet." Another squad member added. Commander Voss held up one of his 4 hands for silence. "The human will run extra flight drills every evening until he can maintain formation. Dismissed." Over the next few days, Jake's training became a nightmare. Every morning brought new exercises designed for beings with superior strength and speed. Every afternoon ended with harsh criticism from Commander Voss. Every evening meant extra practice while the others rested. But during those long, lonely practice sessions, Jake began to notice things. He watched recordings of their failed missions and studied the patterns. The Catherians always did exactly what their training manuals said to do. The Centauri never deviated from their traditional battle formations. They were predictable. Jake started spending his free time in the station's database, learning everything he could about his squad mate's species. Catherians valued logic above all else, but that made them inflexible when situations changed quickly. Centauri were incredibly disciplined, but their discipline sometimes prevented them from adapting to new threats. The breakthrough came during a live fire exercise against automated defense drones. The squad was tasked with disabling a communications array protected by 12 attack drones. Commander Voss deployed them in standard defensive positions, with overlapping fields of fire and clear retreat routes. The drones attacked in waves, just as the training manuals predicted they would. The squad followed procedure perfectly, falling back to secondary positions when the pressure became too great. But the drones kept coming, and ammunition was running low. "Tactical retreat to Rally Point Alpha," Commander Voss ordered over the Calm Jake watched from his support position as his squad mates prepared to withdraw. But something didn't feel right. The drones weren't acting like normal automated systems. They were herding the squad toward specific areas, almost like they were thinking. Then Jake saw it. The drones always paused for exactly 2.3 seconds between attack runs to recalibrate their sensors. It was a tiny window, barely long enough to matter. But if someone was in exactly the right position at exactly the right time... "Commander, request permission to break formation," Jake said quickly. "Denied. Maintain your position and prepare for retreat." Jake watched as another wave of drones prepared to attack. His squad mates were moving to their retreat positions, following the plan perfectly. In 30 seconds, they would be safely away from the exercise area. They would also have failed their mission completely. Jake made a decision that would either end his career or change everything. He broke formation and launched himself directly at the center of the drone formation. Every weapon in the area focused on him. Laser fire filled the space around him like deadly fireworks. According to every military manual ever written, he should have been dead in seconds. But Jake had timed it perfectly. He reached the communications array just as the drones entered their recalibration pause. For 2.3 seconds, he was completely alone with the target. He planted his explosive charges and triggered his emergency thrusters, launching himself away from the array. The explosion destroyed the communications system and disabled half the drones. The remaining drones, confused by the loss of their central coordination, became easy targets for his squad mates. The exercise was over. They had won. But when Jake returned to the debriefing room, Commander Voss was waiting for him with a formal reprimand ready to file. "Cadet Martinez, you directly disobeyed orders during a live fire exercise. That level of insubordination is grounds for immediate dismissal from the program." Jake stood at attention, waiting for his career to end. But then Kexivore spoke up. "Commander," the Catherian said slowly, "the humans' action did achieve the mission objective. The mission objective was achieved through reckless endangerment and violation of established tactics," Commander Voss replied. "But it was achieved," said one of the Zentari. "In actual combat, results matter more than methods." Commander Voss studied the mission recordings for a long time. Finally, he looked up at Jake. "Your tactical analysis was correct. The drones did have a recalibration weakness that our standard approaches would never have exploited. However, your methods were completely contrary to proper military discipline." Jake swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. You will receive a formal reprimand for disobeying orders. You will also receive commendation for innovative tactical thinking." Commander Voss's crystal skin seemed to shift slightly. "Perhaps there is more to human unpredictability than I initially believed." That night, Jake sat in his small room feeling confused. He had succeeded and failed at the same time. He had proven that human thinking could be valuable, but he had also shown that he couldn't be trusted to follow orders. Through his window, the stars looked a little less cold than before. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to find his place among them. The success of the hostage rescue mission brought unwanted attention to Jake and his squad. Within days of their return, Admiral Rex Thorne arrived at Centauri Defense Station. Jake had never met the Admiral in person, but every human in the military knew his name. He was the one who had fought for humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Defense Force. Admiral Thorne was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. When he met with Jake privately, his expression was serious. "Son, you've been making waves throughout the command structure," the Admiral said, settling into a chair that was too big for his human frame. Some of our alien allies are impressed by your innovative tactics. Others are concerned about human unpredictability disrupting their established military doctrines. Jake sat up straighter. Sir, I've only been trying to do my job and serve the mission objectives. I know that, and Commander Voss has given you excellent reviews. But there are those who think humans might be too dangerous to fully integrate into mixed units. They're worried we'll encourage other species to abandon proven tactics in favor of risky experimentation. The Admiral paused and looked at Jake carefully. That's why your next assignment is so important. Intelligence has detected something at the edge of our explored territory. Something that has every species in the Defense Force worried. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of something, sir? We're not sure. Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures moving through systems that should be empty. When our probe ships investigate, they find dead worlds. Not destroyed by war or natural disaster, but drained, like something sucked all the life out of them. Admiral Thorne activated a holographic display showing star charts of the Outer Rim territories. Several star systems were marked in red. 3 systems have gone dark in the past 2 months. The last probe to investigate sent back partial data before it was destroyed. The energy readings don't match any known technology. What does this have to do with my assignment, sir? Commander Voss has been chosen to lead a reconnaissance mission to investigate the threat. He specifically requested that you accompany his squad, despite pressure from his superiors to use a more experienced team member. Jake felt a mix of pride and terror. Commander Voss had chosen him for a critical mission, but it sounded like they would be facing something completely unknown. Sir, why would Commander Voss want me for this mission? Admiral Thorne smiled slightly. According to his report, he wants to see how human adaptability performs against a completely unknown enemy. Apparently, your ability to think outside established doctrine might be exactly what's needed when facing something that doesn't follow any known rules. 2 days later, Jake found himself aboard the stealth reconnaissance ship Silent Observer, heading toward the edge of known space. The crew was small, just Commander Voss's squad plus a few specialist officers. The ship was designed to avoid detection, with advanced sensor arrays and experimental cloaking technology. As they traveled deeper into the outer rim, the atmosphere aboard the ship grew tense. Long-range sensors began picking up strange readings, energy patterns that seemed to bend space itself and signatures that appeared and disappeared without explanation. "Look at this," said Lieutenant Vera Walsh, the ship's science officer. She was a young woman with short red hair and an intense focus on her instruments. "These energy readings don't make sense. It's like something is there one moment and gone the next, but not because it moved. It's like it stopped existing and then started existing again." Commander Voss studied the sensor data with his 4 hands, working multiple control panels simultaneously. "Could this be some form of advanced cloaking technology?" "I don't think so, sir," Lieutenant Walsh replied. "Cloaking technology hides something that's there. This looks more like something that phases in and out of our reality entirely." Jake stared at the sensor readings, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The patterns reminded him of something, but he couldn't quite place what it was. They reached the first dead system 12 hours later. What they found there would stay with Jake for the rest of his life. The star was still burning, but everything else was wrong. The planets hung in their orbits like empty shells. The surfaces that had once been green and blue were now gray and lifeless. Even the asteroids looked different, as if something essential had been drained from the very rock itself. "Life signs?" Commander Voss asked. "Nothing," Lieutenant Walsh whispered. Not just no intelligent life, no life at all, no bacteria, no plant matter, no organic compounds. It's like the concept of life was simply removed from this entire system. They moved through the dead system in complete silence, their sensors recording everything. Jake noticed that even his squad mates seemed affected by what they were seeing. HFY, normally confident and aggressive, kept checking his weapon systems as if he expected attack at any moment. It was in the second dead system that they encountered the enemy. The attack came without warning. One moment they were alone among the lifeless planets. The next moment their ship was surrounded by vessels that seemed to exist only partially in normal space. The enemy ships flickered in and out of visibility like ghosts, and their weapons fired energy that Jake's instruments couldn't even classify. "Evasive maneuvers!" Commander Voss ordered. "All defensive systems online!" But their weapons couldn't target something that wasn't completely there. The enemy ships phased in and out of reality, attacking from angles that shouldn't exist, and then disappearing before return fire could reach them. Jake watched the tactical display in growing horror as their situation became hopeless. The enemy had completely surrounded them, and their phasing technology made them nearly impossible to fight. "Commander," Jake called out over the sound of alarms, "I think I see a pattern in their movement." "Explain quickly, Cadet." Jake pointed at the sensor readings. "They're not phasing randomly. Look at the intervals. 3.7 seconds visible, 2.1 seconds phased out, then 4.2 seconds visible. It's not random. It's following some kind of natural rhythm." Lieutenant Walsh looked at her instruments with new understanding. He's right. They're not using technology to phase. They're riding some kind of natural phenomenon, like they're following currents that exist between dimensions. "Can we predict where they'll appear next?" Commander Voss asked. Jake studied the patterns more carefully. "Maybe. If I'm right about the rhythm, they should all phase back into normal space in exactly 15 seconds. Commander Voss made a decision that would have been impossible for any other alien commander. "All power to engines. Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace the moment Cadet Martinez gives the signal." "Sir, jumping to hyperspace inside a gravity well is incredibly dangerous," the pilot protested. "So is staying here. Martinez, call it." Jake watched the chronometer count down, his heart pounding. If he was wrong, they would jump directly into an enemy ship. If he was right, they might have a few seconds when all the enemy vessels were solid enough to avoid. "Now!" Jake shouted. The silent observer leaped into hyperspace just as the enemy ships phased back into normal reality. For a moment, Jake thought they had escaped cleanly. Then the hyperspace tunnel around them began to collapse. "They're following us!" Lieutenant Walsh called out. "Somehow they're destabilizing our hyperspace field." Jake looked at the sensor readings and saw something that made his blood freeze. The enemy ships were somehow moving through hyperspace without using hyperspace drives. They were phasing in and out of the tunnel itself, attacking their ship from dimensions that shouldn't exist. "Emergency drop back to normal space," Commander Voss ordered. "They fell out of hyperspace in an unknown system, their ship damaged and their pursuers still following." But Jake had noticed something during their brief time in hyperspace. "Commander, the enemy ships had trouble maintaining their phasing while they were in the hyperspace tunnel. The dimensional barriers between hyperspace and normal space seemed to interfere with their ability." "Are you suggesting we use hyperspace as a weapon?" "Not exactly, sir. But what if we could find a natural phenomenon that creates similar dimensional interference? Something that would force them to remain in normal space where we can fight them?" HFY looked up from his damage control station. The human is suggesting we deliberately fly into a stellar phenomenon that could destroy us, in hopes that it might also affect the enemy. Yes, Jake said simply. It's risky, but it's better than trying to fight ghosts. Commander Voss studied the star charts of their current location. There is a stellar storm in this system. The interference it generates affects all forms of space travel. If your theory is correct, it might also affect the enemy's phasing ability. And if the human is wrong? Kexavor asked. Commander Voss looked at Jake for a long moment. Then we die fighting instead of running. But I have learned that human intuition often sees patterns that logic misses. They flew directly into the heart of the stellar storm, their ship buffeted by energy discharges that lit up space like deadly fireworks. Behind them, the enemy ships followed, but as they entered the storm, something changed. The phasing stopped. Suddenly, the enemy vessels were solid, visible, and vulnerable. For the first time, the silent observer's weapons could target them effectively. The journey back to Centauri Defense Station should have taken 3 days. It took 8. The silent observer was badly damaged, and they had to make frequent stops for repairs. Worse, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward the core systems of the galaxy. The enemy, whatever they were, had begun their main assault. Jake spent most of the return trip working with Lieutenant Walsh to analyze the data they had collected. The enemy called themselves the Void Hunters, according to the partial communications they had intercepted. They were ancient beings who had been sleeping at the edge of the galaxy for millions of years, and now they were awake and hungry. Look at this pattern, Lieutenant Walsh said, pointing at energy readings on her screen. Every system they attack shows the same sequence. First, they drain all organic life. Then they absorb the energy from the star itself. Finally, they move on to the next system. Jake studied the timeline. How long do we have before they reach the core worlds? At their current rate of advance, maybe 2 months. 3 at most. Commander Voss entered the small lab where they were working. His crystal skin had taken on a darker hue since their encounter with the Void Hunters, and Jake had learned that this meant the Catherian was deeply concerned. I have been in communication with Defense Force Command, the commander announced. The situation is worse than we initially believed. The Void Hunters have split into multiple fleets. While we were investigating the Outer Rim, they began attacking. Systems on 3 different fronts. Jake felt his stomach drop. Earth? Earth's system is not immediately threatened, but Sol Command has gone to full alert status. Every available ship is being mobilized for defense. Lieutenant Walsh looked up from her instruments. Sir, based on our analysis, conventional weapons won't be effective against them. Their phasing technology makes them nearly invulnerable to standard military tactics. Which is why Defense Force Command is very interested in our discovery that stellar phenomena can disrupt their abilities, Commander Voss replied. However, we cannot rely on finding convenient stellar storms every time we need to fight them. Jake had been thinking about this problem for days. What if we don't wait for natural phenomena? What if we create our own? Both Lieutenant Walsh and Commander Voss stared at him. Explain, the commander said. The stellar storm disrupted their phasing because it created dimensional interference. But stellar storms are just massive electromagnetic and gravitational disturbances. We have weapons that create similar effects on a smaller scale. Lieutenant Walsh began working with her instruments. He's right. If we could modify our shield generators to create the same kind of dimensional resonance, it would drain our power systems completely, Commander Voss pointed out. We might get one shot before our ships became defenseless. Then we make that one shot count, Jake said. But there's something else. The Void Hunters communicate through some kind of collective consciousness. When we hurt one of them in the stellar storm, they all seem to feel it. What if we could use that against them? Commander Voss's skin brightened slightly. Psychological warfare? Exactly. Humans have been studying psychology for thousands of years. We know how to break down enemy morale, create fear and confusion, turn groups against each other. If the Void Hunters have a collective mind, they might be vulnerable to psychological attacks in ways they never expected. When they finally reached Centauri Defense Station, they found it transformed into a fortress. Ships from dozens of different worlds filled the docking bays. The corridors buzzed with activity as military personnel from every species in the Galactic Defense Force prepared for what might be the final battle. Admiral Thorne met them at the docking bay, his face grim. Commander Voss, your report is the first good news we've had in weeks. Defense Force Command wants to implement your anti-phasing tactics immediately. The tactics were developed by Cadet Martinez, sir, Commander Voss said. I recommend he be involved in their implementation. Admiral Thorne looked surprised. A cadet? For an operation of this magnitude? With respect, sir, Commander Voss continued, this situation requires thinking that goes beyond conventional military doctrine. The cadet has demonstrated abilities that could be crucial to our success. Over the next few days, Jake found himself in the strange position of briefing senior officers from species he had never seen before. His ideas about psychological warfare and dimensional disruption were met with skepticism from some commanders and intense interest from others. The breakthrough came when a Zentari admiral suggested combining human psychological tactics with Catherian technology and Zentari discipline. Instead of fighting the Void Hunters ship to ship, they would create a coordinated assault that attacked them on multiple levels simultaneously. Jake's role in the plan was both crucial and terrifying. He would be aboard the command ship, analyzing Void Hunter behavior patterns and psychological responses in real time. Based on his observations, he would coordinate psychological warfare broadcasts designed to disrupt their collective consciousness. But the plan required something unprecedented in Galactic Defense Force history. Commander Voss would temporarily transfer tactical command to Jake during the psychological warfare phase of the battle. An alien commander putting a human cadet in charge of fleet operations was unthinkable by traditional standards. Are you certain about this? Admiral Thorne asked Commander Voss privately. Your career could end if this fails. Admiral, I have observed this human for months. He sees patterns that our logic misses. He understands psychology in ways that our species cannot. If anyone can find a weakness in the Void Hunter collective mind, it will be him. The final battle began 3 weeks later in the Kepler system, chosen because its twin stars created natural electromagnetic disturbances that would help mask the Defense Force fleet's preparations. Jake stood on the command bridge of the flagship, Galactic Unity, watching as hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds formed into battle formation. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, representing every advanced civilization in their region of space. The Void Hunters arrived exactly on schedule, their fleet of impossible ships phasing in and out of normal space like nightmares made real. They outnumbered the Defense Force fleet 3-1, and their weapons had already proven capable of draining the life from entire worlds. Dimensional disruption charges ready, reported the weapons officer, a Catherian, with crystal skin that glowed bright blue with combat excitement. Psychological warfare systems online, added Lieutenant Walsh from her position at the communications array. Commander Voss turned to Jake. Cadet Martinez, you have tactical command for the psychological warfare phase. All units will follow. Your orders. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical force. Hundreds of ships, millions of lives, the future of galactic civilization, all depending on his ability to understand and exploit the psychology of beings that had existed since before Earth's sun was born. All units, this is Cadet Martinez, he said into the fleet communication system. Commence dimensional disruption on my mark. Target the largest concentration of enemy ships first. The space around the Void Hunter fleet erupted in coruscating energy as dozens of modified shield generators created overlapping fields of dimensional interference. For the first time in the battle, the enemy ships became solid and vulnerable. Now, broadcasting psychological warfare pattern alpha, Jake announced. The fleet's communication arrays began transmitting a carefully crafted mix of human music, mathematical concepts, and emotional appeals designed to create confusion in the void. Hunter collective consciousness. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Void Hunter ships began moving erratically, their perfect formations breaking apart as conflicting impulses tore through their shared mind. Some ships attacked their own allies, others fled in random directions, and a few simply stopped moving. Entirely. It's working, Lieutenant Walsh called out. Their collective communication is breaking down. But Jake could see that the psychological attack was only temporary. The Void Hunters were adapting, learning to filter out the human broadcasts. He needed something more. Something that would shatter their collective consciousness permanently. That's when Jake remembered something from his childhood, a lullaby his mother had sung to him when he was afraid of the dark. It was simple, peaceful, and completely human. It spoke of hope, love, and the courage to face unknown dangers. All ships, prepare for psychological warfare pattern Omega, Jake announced. This is going to sound strange, but I need every human in the fleet to sing along with what I'm about to broadcast. Over the fleet communication system, Jake began to sing his mother's lullaby. His voice was joined by Lieutenant Walsh, then by other humans throughout the fleet. Soon, hundreds of human voices were singing together across the darkness of space. The effect on the Void Hunters was catastrophic. Their collective consciousness, built around concepts of hunger, consumption, and emptiness, couldn't process the pure emotional content of the human song. The love, hope, and protective instinct embedded in the simple lullaby was so alien to their nature that it caused complete psychological breakdown. 3 weeks had passed since Jake's successful but unauthorized assault on the communications array. His relationship with the squad had changed in subtle ways. They still didn't fully accept him, but they no longer ignored him completely. Even Kexvor occasionally asked for his opinion during tactical planning sessions. Commander Voss remained distant and critical, but Jake noticed he was watching him more carefully now. Not with the dismissive glances of before, but with something that might have been curiosity. The emergency alarm shattered the morning quiet like a broken bell. Jake was in the middle of his daily fitness routine when the lights started flashing. Red and announcements echoed through the corridors in multiple alien languages. All tactical squads report to briefing stations immediately. This is not a drill. Jake ran through the corridors, dodging other personnel rushing to their posts. He arrived at the briefing room to find his squad mates already assembled, their faces grim. Commander Voss stood before a large display showing a star system Jake didn't recognize. 18 minutes ago, we received a distress call from the civilian transport Harmony's Dream, Commander Voss announced. They were carrying 300 passengers, including 50 children, when they were attacked by pirates near the outer rim. The pirates have taken the ship and are holding all passengers hostage. The display changed to show tactical information about the pirate vessel. It was heavily armed and hiding in an asteroid field that would make any direct assault extremely dangerous. The pirates have made their demands clear, Commander Voss continued. They want safe passage out of Galactic, Defense Force space, and a guarantee that they will not be pursued. In exchange, they will release the hostages unharmed. Kexavor raised one of his hands. Standard procedure would be to surround the asteroid field and wait for them to make a mistake. That could take days, one of the Zentari pointed out. The hostages might not survive that long. Commander Voss nodded grimly. Our orders are to resolve this situation with minimal risk to civilian lives. We have been selected for this mission because of our recent success in unconventional tactics. His eyes found Jake in the group. All squad members will contribute to tactical planning. They spent the next hour analyzing the situation. The pirates had chosen their hiding spot well. The asteroid field provided perfect cover from long-range weapons. Any ship trying to approach would be detected long before it could get close enough to attack. The pirates had already proven they were willing to kill hostages by spacing 3 passengers when the first rescue ships arrived. We could use mining charges to collapse part of the asteroid field, suggested one of the Zentari. Force them out into open space. Too risky, Kexavor replied. The explosions might damage the civilian ship. Jake studied the tactical display, thinking about everything he had learned about the different alien species. Pirates in this part of space were usually a mix of criminals from various worlds. They would have different motivations, different fears, different ways of thinking. What if we don't attack them at all? Jake said quietly. The room went silent. Commander Voss turned to look at him. Explain. Jake stood up, his heart beating fast. The pirates want safe passage and no pursuit, right? What if we give them exactly what they ask for? That would be surrender, Kexavor said coldly. It would encourage every pirate group in the sector to take hostages. Not surrender, Jake continued. A trap, but one they won't see coming because it uses their own psychology against them. Commander Voss's crystal skin shifted to a deeper blue. Continue. Jake walked to the display and pointed at the pirate ship's specifications. Look at their crew. 12 different species, all known criminals. They're not working together because they trust each other. They're working together because they're all greedy and desperate. What if we could make them more greedy? How? Asked one of the Zentari. We offer them something better than safe passage. Something so valuable that their leader can't resist it, but so dangerous that his crew will start to doubt him. Jake outlined his plan. It was risky, complicated, and required perfect timing. Worst of all, it needed someone to volunteer to be captured by the pirates, someone who could convince them he was a smuggler with information about a massive weapons cache hidden in a nearby system. This is madness, Kexavor said when Jake finished, explaining. It requires too many assumptions about pirate psychology. If any part fails, the hostages die. Standard assault tactics also risk the hostages, Jake replied. At least this way we might be able to turn the pirates against each other. Commander Voss studied the plan in silence for several minutes. Finally, he looked up at Jake. This strategy requires someone who can convincingly portray a criminal smuggler. Someone the pirates will believe but not see as a threat. Someone expendable in case the plan fails. Jake nodded. Yes, sir. I volunteer. Absolutely not, Kexavor protested. We cannot risk the mission on an untrained human's ability to fool experienced criminals. Actually, Commander Voss said slowly, the human might be perfect for this role. Pirates expect other aliens to think logically and predictably. They would not expect a human to volunteer for such a dangerous deception. That unexpectedness might be our greatest advantage. 2 hours later, Jake found himself in a small, damaged shuttle drifting toward the asteroid field. His uniform had been replaced with civilian clothes that looked like they had been through several firefights. His shuttle's systems had been carefully sabotaged to look like battle damage. Through his hidden communicator, he could hear Commander Voss giving final instructions. Remember, you must convince them you have valuable information, but not so valuable that they kill you immediately. Make them want to keep you alive long enough to verify your story. The pirate ship's tractor beam caught his shuttle and pulled it into their cargo bay. Jake took a deep breath and prepared to become someone completely different. The pirates who met him were exactly what he had expected. A mix of species, all armed, all looking at him with suspicion and greed. Their leader was a massive creature with gray skin and too many teeth. Well, well, the pirate captain growled. What do we have here? Another refugee from the battle? Jake put on his best frightened expression. Please, I'm just a smuggler. I don't want any trouble. My ship was damaged when your people attacked that convoy. Smuggler? The captain's eyes lit up with interest. What kind of smuggler? Weapons, mostly. Sometimes information. Jake let his voice shake slightly. Look, I know you're in a difficult situation here. Maybe we can help each other. The captain laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Help each other? You're in no position to help anyone, little human. Actually, I am. Jake straightened up slightly, letting some fake confidence show through his fear. I know where the Defense Force keeps their emergency weapon stockpiles. Enough firepower to outfit a fleet, and I know how to get past their security systems. He could see the greed in the pirate captain's eyes, exactly as he had hoped. But he could also see doubt from some of the other crew members. Perfect. Why? Would you tell us this? One of the pirates asked suspiciously. Because right now you're planning to let those passengers go in exchange for safe passage, Jake replied. But safe passage to where? Every system in this sector will be hunting for you within days. You need a way to disappear completely, and that takes money. Lots of money. The captain was clearly interested, but Jake could see some of the crew exchanging worried glances. They had signed up to raid merchant ships, not to attack Defense Force installations. Over the next several hours, Jake fed the pirates carefully crafted information about fictional weapon caches and security weaknesses. Each detail made the captain more excited and the crew more nervous. Just as Jake had predicted, greed and fear were starting to tear the group apart. Through his hidden communicator, he could hear Commander Voss and the squad moving into position around the asteroid field. The real attack would come soon, but first, Jake needed to create as much chaos inside the pirate ship as possible. There's just one problem, Jake said during a planning session with the pirate leadership. The weapons are stored in a system that has a Defense Force patrol station. We'll need to take out the patrol first, and that means fighting real military ships. Several pirates immediately started arguing. Some wanted to take the risk for the huge payoff. Others wanted to stick with their original plan and escape with the ransom money. The arguments grew louder and angrier. In the confusion, Jake managed to access a maintenance panel and disable the ship's internal communication system. Now the pirates couldn't coordinate with each other, and some sections of the ship had no idea what was happening in other areas. When Commander Voss's attack came, it was perfectly timed. The pirates were too busy fighting among themselves to Mount an effective defense. Jake had already disabled their weapon systems from the inside and helped several groups of hostages reach the escape pods. The battle was over in minutes. The pirates surrendered rather than fight a coordinated assault while their own ship was falling apart around them. Later, as they traveled back to Centauri Defense Station with the rescued hostages, Commander Voss sat beside Jake in the squad transport. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler, and Lieutenant Jake Martinez was still getting used to his new role as co-commander of the Adaptive Tactics Squadron. The squadron's headquarters occupied an entire section of Centauri Defense Station, with training facilities, research labs, and briefing rooms designed to accommodate the most diverse military unit in galactic history. Jake walked through the main training deck, watching his new recruits work through combat exercises. The squadron now included members from 15 different species, all volunteers who had requested transfer after hearing about the human tactics that defeated the Void Hunters. What made Jake proudest was that humans made up less than half the unit. The other species had come because they wanted to learn new ways of thinking, not because they were forced to work with humans. "Lieutenant Martinez," called out Ensign Tony Chen, one of the newest human recruits. "The Valthari squad is having trouble with the improvisation exercise." Jake looked over at the group of tall, blue-skinned aliens who were standing motionless in the middle of a simulated battlefield. The Valthari were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible memory and perfect execution of complex plans. Unfortunately, that same precision made it almost impossible for them to adapt when their plans didn't work. "What's the scenario?" Jake asked. "Urban rescue mission. They're supposed to extract civilians from a building, but the original plan assumed the building would be stable. We changed the parameters so that half the structure collapsed, blocking their planned routes." Jake nodded. This was exactly the kind of problem the squadron had been created to solve. Different species had different strengths, but they also had different blind spots. The Valthari could execute perfect strategies, but they struggled when forced to improvise. Humans were natural improvisers, but they sometimes made reckless decisions. The goal was to teach everyone to use their strengths while covering for their weaknesses. "Let me talk to them," Jake said. He approached the Valthari squad leader, a female named Sakara, whose skin had turned a darker shade of blue, a sign of frustration in her species. "Problem, Ensign?" "Lieutenant, the mission parameters have changed." "Beyond acceptable limits," Sakara replied in her precise musical voice. "Our tactical analysis indicates a 73% probability of civilian casualties if we proceed with improvised tactics." Jake smiled. This was a common issue with Valthari thinking. They wanted certainty before taking action, but real combat rarely offered certainty. "What if I told you that not acting guarantees 100% civilian casualties?" Sakara's skin shifted to an even darker blue. "That would create an impossible decision matrix." "Exactly. Welcome to human-style tactical thinking." Jake activated a holographic display showing the collapsed building. "Look, your original plan was perfect for the original scenario. But perfection isn't the goal anymore. Good enough is good enough, as long as you can adapt when things change." He pointed to a section of debris near the building's base. "What do you see there?" Sakara studied the image with her large, dark eyes. "Structural instability. Attempting to move through that area would risk further collapse." "Right. But what else do you see?" The Valthari woman looked again, her head tilting slightly. I am not certain what you mean." Jake had learned that different species literally saw the world differently. Valthari eyes were designed to spot patterns and calculate precise measurements. Human eyes were better at noticing things that didn't fit expected patterns. Look at the way the debris fell, Jake said. It's not random. The building collapsed in a specific direction, which means the remaining structure is actually more stable than it looks. And see those exposed pipes? That's the building's old pneumatic delivery system. It connects to every floor and leads directly to the roof. Understanding dawned in Sakara's eyes, and her skin began to lighten. We could use the delivery system as an alternate route. Now you're thinking like a human, Jake said with a grin. The plan doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work. The exercise continued, and this time the Valthari squad successfully extracted all the civilians by using the pneumatic system. It wasn't elegant, and it wasn't by the book, but it worked. As Jake watched the debriefing session, he felt a familiar presence behind him. Commander Voss approached, his crystal skin showing the satisfied amber glow that meant he was pleased with what he was seeing. The Valthari are adapting well to human-style improvisation, the Catherian observed. They're smart. They just needed to learn that sometimes good enough really is good enough. Jake turned to face his partner. Any word from command about our next assignment? Commander Voss's expression grew more serious. Actually, yes. We have been requested for a diplomatic mission. Jake raised an eyebrow. Diplomatic? We're military tactical specialists. That is precisely why we are needed. Commander Voss activated a small holographic projector, showing a star system Jake didn't recognize. This is the Kepler Reach on the far side of where we fought the Void Hunters. 3 separate species have claimed the system, and tensions are rising toward open warfare. What does that have to do with us? The 3 species are all survivors of worlds destroyed by the Void Hunters. They have no homes to return to, so they all want to colonize the same system. Standard diplomatic protocols have failed because each species approaches the problem with their own cultural assumptions. Jake studied the star chart. And Command thinks human psychology might help? Not just human psychology. The combination of human adaptability and our squadron's mixed species perspective. We understand how different ways of thinking can work together instead of working against each other. 2 weeks later, Jake found himself on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, traveling toward what might become the site of the first post-Void Hunter War. The 3 species involved in the dispute were all aboard the ship, though they had insisted on separate quarters and refused to attend joint meetings. The Kalari were a proud warrior culture, tall and muscular with golden skin and elaborate tattoos marking their battle honors. They believed the system belonged to them because they had arrived first and could defend it from any challengers. The Eshtan were small, furry beings with large eyes and incredible technological abilities. They claimed the system because their advanced scanners had discovered it, and they had already begun building automated colonies on 2 of the planets. The Mordak were an ancient species with gray, stone-like skin and minds that worked on timescales humans could barely comprehend. They wanted the system because their calculations showed it would be perfect for their long-term survival needs. Jake spent the first few days of the journey observing all 3 groups, trying to understand not just what they wanted, but why they wanted it. Commander Voss focused on the technical aspects of the dispute, analyzing each species' actual needs versus their stated demands. The problem is deeper than just territorial claims, Jake told Commander Voss during one of their evening planning sessions. Each species is dealing with trauma from losing their homeworld. The Kalari want to prove they're still strong. The Eshtan want to build something that can't be destroyed. The Mordak want security for their children's children. Commander Voss nodded slowly. So the conflict is not really about the star system. It is about fear. Exactly. They're all afraid of losing everything again, so they're holding on to this system like it's the last safe place in the galaxy. But it is not the last safe place. Our surveys have identified dozens of suitable systems in the region. Jake smiled. Right. But they don't know that. And even if they did, they're too focused on this one system to consider alternatives. The breakthrough came when Jake convinced all three species to attend a joint meeting, not to negotiate, but to share their stories about what they had lost. The Kalari delegation spoke of watching their proud cities burn. The Eshtan described seeing their technological marvels consumed by the Void Hunters. The Mordak told of ancient libraries and cultural sites that had existed for millions of years, all reduced to lifeless stone. As the stories were shared, something unexpected happened. The three species began to recognize the pain in each other's experiences. The Kalari warrior who had lost his entire family saw the same grief in the eyes of the Eshtan engineer who had watched her life's work disappear. The Mordak elder who spoke of destroyed temples found common ground with the Kalari priest whose sacred sites had been drained of life. "You all want the same thing," Jake said quietly when the stories were finished. "You want a new home that will be safe for your people. You want to build something that can't be taken away from you." "Yes," said Korval, the Kalari war leader. "But there is only one suitable system." Jake activated a holographic display showing the local region of space. "Actually, there are 17 systems within 50 light-years that could support your needs. But more importantly, you don't have to choose just one." The room fell silent as Jake outlined his proposal. Instead of fighting over one system, why not work together to establish a mutual defense network across multiple systems? The Kalari could provide military protection. The Eshtan could contribute their advanced technology, and the Mordak could offer their long-term planning expertise. The three Zarion natives spun around, their eyes wide with shock and fear. But Jake continued talking in a gentle, understanding voice. "You feel like you don't belong on your own planet anymore. You feel like your culture and your people have been forgotten in the rush to build a multicultural society. That's a real problem, and it deserves a real solution." One of the conspirators, an elderly female with pale green skin, stared at Jake with confusion. "You are human. Why would you understand our situation?" "Because humans went through something similar on Earth," Jake replied. "When different cultures started mixing together, some people felt like they were losing their identity. But we learned that diversity doesn't have to mean—" Lieutenant Jake Martinez stood in the briefing room of the Adaptive Tactics Squadron, watching as his diverse team filed in for their morning meeting. Over the past year, the squadron had grown from a small experimental unit to one of the most requested groups in the Galactic Defense Force. Their success in combining different species' strengths had earned them a reputation as problem solvers who could handle situations that stumped traditional military thinking. Today's team included Ensign Sekara, the Valthari who had learned to improvise during urban combat training; Sergeant Liu Wei, a human engineer who specialized in making alien technology work in ways its creators never intended; Corporal Thexna, a insectoid Kree whose compound eyes could spot details that others missed completely; and Lieutenant Zorak, a massive Bronthari whose species was known for their incredible strength and surprising gentleness. Commander Voss entered the room, his crystal skin showing the deep blue color that meant serious business. "We have received an unusual request from Defense Force Command," he announced. "The planet Zerion Prime has asked for our assistance with what they are calling a security crisis." Jake pulled up the planet's information on his tablet. Xerion Prime was a wealthy trade world located at the intersection of several major shipping routes. It was home to over 2 billion beings from dozens of different species, all living together in what was supposed to be perfect harmony. "What kind of security crisis?" Jake asked. "That is the unusual part," Commander Voss replied. "There is no external threat. No pirates, no hostile aliens, no natural disasters. The crisis appears to be entirely internal, but the planetary government cannot identify the source." Sakara raised her hand, her blue skin showing the pale color of confusion. "How can there be a security crisis with no identifiable threat?" Commander Voss activated the main display, showing recent news reports from Xerion Prime. Over the past 6 months, the planet has experienced increasing social unrest. Different species that have lived together peacefully for decades are suddenly suspicious of each other. Trade agreements are being broken. There have been protests, riots, and several incidents of violence between groups that were previously allies. Jake studied the reports with growing concern. "It sounds like someone is deliberately trying to create conflict between the different species." "That was our initial assessment as well," Commander Voss agreed. "However, Xerion Prime's security forces have found no evidence of outside interference, no suspicious communications, no infiltrators, no propaganda campaigns. The conflicts seem to be arising spontaneously." Lieutenant Zorak spoke up in his deep, rumbling voice. "Perhaps the problem is not what is being added, but what is being taken away." Everyone turned to look at the large Bronthari. His species was known for their philosophical thinking, often seeing problems from angles that others missed. "Explain what you mean," Jake said. "On my homeworld, we have a saying," Zorak continued. "When the music stops, the dancers remember. They are strangers. Perhaps something that was keeping the peace on Xerion Prime has been removed or disrupted." Jake felt that familiar tingle of recognition that came when he was starting to understand a pattern. What if Lieutenant Zorak is right? What if there was something helping different species get along and now it's gone? Commander Voss considered this possibility. "Our mission will be to identify what has changed on Xerion Prime and restore stability. However, this assignment comes with a special challenge. The planetary government has agreed to our investigation, but they have requested that we work undercover." "Undercover?" Sergeant Liu asked. "How does a mixed-species military unit work undercover?" "By not being a military unit," Commander Voss replied. "According to our cover identities, we are a group of traders and tourists visiting Xerion Prime for business and pleasure. Our real investigation will have to be conducted without revealing our true purpose." 3 days later, Jake found himself walking through the crowded marketplace of New Harmony, Xerion Prime's largest city. The city lived up to its name. It was beautiful, with architecture that combined styles from dozens of different worlds. Tall spires next to low, spreading buildings, crystal gardens beside metal sculptures. It should have been a perfect example of interspecies cooperation. But Jake could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. Groups of different species kept to themselves, watching other groups with suspicion. Conversations stopped when strangers approached. Security forces patrolled in larger numbers than seemed necessary for a peaceful trade world. "Any observations?" Commander Voss asked through their hidden communication system. He was several blocks away, posing as a Catherian art dealer. "The physical signs of social stress are everywhere," Jake replied quietly. "People are clustering by species instead of mixing naturally. Body language shows defensive postures, and I'm seeing a lot of new security cameras and checkpoints that weren't." In the original city plans, over the next few days, each team member investigated different aspects of life on Zerion Prime. Sakara used her perfect memory to catalog every change in the city's layout and social patterns. Liu Wei examined the planet's communication and transportation networks for signs of tampering. Thexana's compound eyes spotted subtle details in alien behavior that others missed. Zorak spent time in the city's parks and gathering places, listening to the philosophical and emotional undercurrents of conversations. Their breakthrough came when Thexana noticed something that would have been invisible to most other beings. In her insectoid language, she reported that many of the aliens in the city were producing different pheromones than normal for their species. Pheromones? Jake asked during their evening briefing at their hotel. How is that relevant? Thexana clicked her mandibles in excitement. Many species use chemical signals for social bonding and communication. These signals help different groups recognize friends versus strangers. But the pheromone patterns I am detecting suggest that something is interfering with these natural signals. Commander Voss's skin shifted to a thoughtful silver color. If natural social bonding mechanisms are being disrupted, that could explain why previously friendly groups are becoming suspicious of each other. Sergeant Liu looked up from his technical scanner. I've been analyzing the city's air filtration system. There are some unusual chemical traces that don't match any natural or industrial processes I know about. Jake felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind. What if someone is putting something in the air? Something that interferes with the chemical signals different species use to recognize each other as friends? That would be diabolical, Sakara said, her skin turning the dark blue of anger. To turn people against each other by manipulating their basic biology. But who would do such a thing? Zorak asked. And why? The answer came the next day, when Jake followed a maintenance worker into the underground tunnels beneath New Harmony. The worker led him through a maze of pipes and machinery to a hidden chamber filled with sophisticated chemical processing equipment. But the chamber wasn't empty. 3 figures in environmental suits were monitoring the equipment, and Jake recognized their body shapes immediately. They were Zerion natives, members of the original species that had inhabited the planet before it became a multicultural trade world. Jake activated his emergency communicator and signaled for backup, then settled in to observe and listen. What he heard made his blood run cold. The Zerion natives were deliberately poisoning their planet's atmosphere with chemicals designed to disrupt interspecies social bonding. Their goal was to drive away all the alien settlers and reclaim their world for themselves. The chemicals are working perfectly, one of them was saying. The different species are starting to distrust each other. Soon they will leave on their own, and Zerion Prime will belong to its rightful owners again. What about the economic collapse? Asked another. Without the alien traders, our world will become poor and isolated. Better poor and pure than wealthy, and polluted with alien influence, the first speaker replied. Jake had heard enough. He signaled his team and prepared to move in. But as he watched the 3 conspirators, he realized that simply stopping them wouldn't solve the real problem. These weren't evil beings. They were people who felt like strangers on their own world, displaced by the success of multiculturalism. When Commander Voss and the rest of the team arrived, Jake had a different plan than anyone expected. Instead of immediately arresting the conspirators, Jake stepped into the chamber with his hands visible and empty. "We know what you're doing," he said calmly. "We know why you're doing it, and we want to help you find a better solution."